The left and right are not the same. There is more than a political division separating us. This division cannot be glassed over, nor can a centralist politics be created or established. This division points to something far more fundamental. This is something the left probably understands much better than the right. The right thinks that the right/left divide has something to do with economics. The right is viewed as a group that supports private enterprise and ownership, and the left as those who prefer public ownership at least of the means of production. The problem we face is that this division is a diversion. It's not even real, or if real, not meaningful. But saying that, the normal reaction is to assume that the outcome is an amalgamation, a unification of right and left. This is like saying because we have discovered that the enemy has infiltrated outlines, the outcome is peace. If we come together because the division between right and left is artificial, we have annihilation. The division is not real, but the right and left are real things. There is a division, but it is not where we think it is. Let's put it this way, with another bad analogy. Just because the criminals who robbed the bank have tried to divide the loot in an unfair way, does not mean there is not a way to divide the loot in a fair way. But the division of the loot ought to be along the lines of the victim and the bandits, with none of the loot going to the criminal. There is a right and left divide, but it is not along the issue of property ownership. The left and right argue that one group is wrong and the other right. That is possible, but the truth is, both are in error. If private groups cannot claim ownership of commercial property or assets, neither can the state. Both claims are unwarranted and without merit. So what does it mean for nations to go to war over if the world's assets ought to be in private or public hands? Ask yourself, who created the universe? Whatever your answer is, it will not be humans or human beings. If energy cannot be created or destroyed, it is certain no person had anything to do with the creation of this planet, let alone the universe. We are left with the options of God or a universe with the same attributes of God. Only that which has the power of God can create reality. So, for the sake of brevity, let's just call this force, God. If God created the universe, then God owns the universe, not man, not governments, and certainly not some human being claiming he has a divine right to own what God created. On the positive side, if God owns what he created, human beings own what they created. And as simple as that, we have a division that makes sense and is absolute and without qualification. If you created it, you own it. If you did not create it, you do not own it, nor do you have any claim to it. This is where the division between right and left is, but the left has confused the issue and tried to tie the right with a similarly untenable position regarding ownership. The attitude towards ownership was not what it is today. This is why the division of the past is not the division we see today. In the past, people owned personal and private property, but the ownership was closer to what we now call stewardship. Even when the king had absolute power or great power, he was the steward of the land and the protector of his people. One did not have power as a right devoid of duty. The right existed because of the duty. The highest lord and the lowest serf were expected to play their role and contribute to the broader society. The nation was not seen as a buffet table, but as a kind of business in which we all worked, and all had a role to play. It did not matter your income or position, one still endeavored to seek employment within the national enterprise. This appears to be the aspect of stewardship even Christians do not get. Due to the limitations of our leaders, minds, and systems, we have employed ideas of ownership that do not reflect biblical principles, but all the same, good men tried to make the system work as God would have expected us to. We were not perfect, and the system certainly was far from what God wanted, but our ancestors worked hard trying to make it work in the way that reflected out faith. But good men always do this. On the other hand, evil men take advantage of every weakness in the system. The system did not change appreciably, but the people operating it did. Good people make everything work good, bad people destroy even the best system. This is why we are required to separate from the world, meaning the world of evil, the world of the parasite. God made it simple for us, he knew we would avoid understanding. God knew if we could plead ignorance of what he wanted, most would. If given the chance, most of us would claim God's intentions were not clear and our sin is all a misunderstanding. And so, God made the world logical. God made the world so that only the intentionally deceitful would get it wrong. God is not constrained by logic, but he constrained himself so he could be understood by us. Everyone understands contradiction and coherence. We all know when things make sense and cohere, and when they fail to make sense, due to being contradictions. To make things even more clear, God worked according to the law of the excluded middle. This is why we have black and white, good and evil, the saved and unsaved. God made the light and darkness, and he drew a line between them. The East cannot meet the West because everything has its place. The left and all of the apologists of the dark places tell us this is a time for coming together, that we cannot allow hate to divide us or the actions of a few extremists to widen the gulf between us. There is no reconciliation possible between good and evil. We cannot vote our way out of this, and we certainly cannot negotiate a compromise with the devil. But as much as some of us might accept the devil's existence, few of us are willing to concede that his minions might include some of the people we know. This is the product of cultural relativism. There is evil in the world, but virtually everyone manages to not cross that invisible line into damnation. Or as some mothers would say, my son might have hung out with the wrong kind of people, but he was always good to me. But that is the difference between the right and the left. For the right, good is not subjective and it is not tightly connected to a mother's love. There is a line and it has nothing to do with the law or with personal opinion. What is more, we know the government ought not be in people's bedrooms, dictating sexual mores, but then keep it in the bedroom. Yes, you have a wonderful culture and it is enriching, but stop forcing enrichment upon us. If we wish to celebrate or partake of your culture, we will ask. Is culture entertainment? The left appears to think so. But do you really want a group of overweight white men doing a belly dance down Main Street? What you do generally looks as ridiculous as this. Annoying people is not usually going to win converts or even garner sympathy. It is usually easier to have a positive view of things you do not meet as an obstruction on your way to work. The right will get violent in response to a provocation. The left are the ones doing the provoking. What the left calls provocation is usually nothing more than doing what was always done and is done in most countries in the world, without it being considered offensive, such as flying the national flag. But these issues can be argued indefinitely with not resolution. They become an issue only because of a wider problem. The nation has three agencies that all conspire to wreak havoc on the nation. These three agencies are its politics, its economics, and its religion. The government, the structure of ownership and the complacency of the church all cause social problems to be made worse. We cannot have a demarcation between good and evil when right and wrong are transferred into the sphere of ethics. Ethics is about law, not about moral boundaries. Ethics is predicated upon natural law, or what is also known as the law of the jungle. The ethical dictum is that might makes right and the end justifies the means. All law is grounded in this dictum, and all ethical systems hearken back to this. If you break the law, it is enforced by might, and in the end, its legitimacy is based solely on the ability of the state to make you obey. But these are all symptoms of the great divide between left and right. There is a fundamental difference. Once you understand this and understand the fundamental divide, all that happens in the world will make sense. What we need to do first is realize where the division is. It is actually not difficult to see. We have a world that requires work. We have a life that needs to be sustained by work. Thus, we have a life we want to live, but we are faced with the realization this life is not free and requires labor to be expended. This is not a novel or startling insight. But this is where the division takes place, because one is either a full participant of the situation, or a manipulator of the situation. If one manipulates the situation, one is a person who is seeking a way to get a share of the benefits without paying the full cost. Thus, the divide is between those who pay their own way and those who do not. Those who do not pay their own way are the enemies of those who do, for they view those who work as a dupe and victim. The only way the scam artist can live is to deprive others of what they worked for. Thus, we really are not the same. The left supports welfare and large, intrusive governments because they support transfer payments to anyone who shows us not to pay the costs they have created, whereas the right prefer to do without than take charity, and if forced to take charity they take the least possible amount and do their best to repay what they received, many times over. We are not the same.